Hey, what's going on, folks? Constitutional lawyer Mike Yoder joins the live stream today to give me a legal analysis on what the heck is going on in New York City with Donald Trump. I have my opinions and my perspective, but I do want to get a legal expert on to go through some things I'm missing or possibly don't understand about the legal process of it all. I think you're going to enjoy this one, folks. Mike's a great guy. Show starts now. It's the Dream Rare Podcast. Welcome to the show. The way to get the news at the desk or on the road. Let's go. God is great and success in our control. The world is crazy, but we get better from obstacles. Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Dream Rare Podcast. I'm here with Mike Yoder, a constitutional lawyer, to give me his perspective on the so far non-existent indictment and arrest. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so what's going on exactly that you see as far as from the legal angle?
I mean, not a whole lot from a legal angle because, I saw that they were talking about this indictment for a little while now. And initially, I was just wondering what they were going to try to charge him with. I mean, they've gone through everything from that raid at Mar-a-Lago with the classified documents. They've ran the gamut effectively as to virtually every single thing that they could come up with to charge Trump with something. And they came up short every time. So they come out and bring up Stormy Daniels. And I'm like, oh, no. I mean, I knew this was going downhill right away. And the interesting thing is the media has been covering it based on this alleged $130,000 payment. And I'm not saying that that payment wasn't made, but it doesn't mean transfer of funds as a single fact is enough to charge someone with a crime. What this was really about was posturing based on the $50,000 a month retainer he kept Cohen on as an attorney. And it was a catch-22 where if Trump disclosed that money on his income tax return, he would be committing an FEC violation allegedly because he didn't disclose it under his campaign finances. If he disclosed it as a campaign expenditure, they would have hit him with the tax evasion for not disclosing the $50,000 monthly retainer on his tax income through the IRS. So it's either you file it personally, FEC violation. You file it with FEC, personal violation. They're going to go either way on it. The problem is that criminal law, unlike civil law, requires beyond reasonable doubt. You have to prove something beyond a reasonable doubt. First issue was, what are you going to do when you've called him a narcissist for the last 7 years, an egomaniac? Now you have to prove that the only reason that he gave the money to Stormy Daniels, assuming for the sake of argument that he even just gave it to Stormy Daniels, you have to prove the only reason he did it was for his campaign, which you're not going to be able to do. The second issue is the fact that it wasn't a crime based on the evidence that they had, because Cohen conceded that he did it on his own. Trump didn't do it. They had that in writing. And even if Cohen backtracks, he's already lied to Congress, so you can impeach him with that evidence. So the whole thing was just a train wreck. And, I think it's a lot of political theater, and I think it's just mainly a distraction.
Yeah, I'm going to mute you when I talk just because there was a little backfeed, and then I'll unmute you when it's your turn. As far as when this first got announced, I said arrested because he said arrest. Trump talked about it, then the media started reporting, and it was always like a maybe. And I call politics Tom and Jerry sometimes. It's like a show where they're always pretending to get each other. It's like, oh, we almost got Adam Schiff. Just click on the link, and it never happened. So I was like, I don't even know if this is going to happen. On a legal side, since you're here, I want to get the legal expertise behind it. Do you think that it was never going to happen? Do you think that Trump kind of getting ahead of it made them kind of fold, or do you think the case was so weak always that like how do you think this really came about? Because it just seems confusing to me as far as what even happened, like some sort of head fake / just nothing going on.
I mean, realistically, I think Trump was just being Trump. I think that he does have an ego issue. I think that he is he gets in his own way more than anything. But what really happened was, I think that there was a lot of outside pressure on Bragg to bring the charge, and he just didn't have it. I mean, the grand jury convened, and then they canceled the rest of the week with the grand jury convening. And for those that aren't, legally educated, those that aren't attorneys, that's a big deal, and it's extremely embarrassing because when you're in with the grand jury is made up of lay citizens. There is nobody in that room other than the grand jury and the prosecutor. What is said during the grand jury proceedings, what is presented is sealed. Nobody can see that or introduce that as evidence at a later time. So the fact that they weren't even able to get a grand jury indictment out of this with New Yorkers, the same people that would make up the jury, and it's a prosecutor who, I'm not saying that they do lie. Again, I don't know because I'm never in the room. But in concept, it's the prosecutor putting on the evidence, whatever they have to get the indictment. He couldn't even do it. And that's a probable cause. They couldn't even lodge charges. And then imagine going to trial where he can actually defend himself, being Trump, and they have to hit it beyond a reasonable doubt. There's no way in hell that that's ever going to work. So it just backfired. Or maybe they're learning their lesson and not following through with their stupid plans and realizing that it's going to come back to bite them in the ass twice as hard if they try to follow through with it.
So I heard about the grand jury investigation. So that's just a normal jury of people. And basically, it seems like at any cost that the media and Trump knew that the grand jury was going to get together. And maybe they both thought that they were going to charge Trump. And then when they got together, that they weren't even able to get a charge. So it's like both sides were kind of flat footed, like, oh, that didn't even work.
Yeah, like they couldn't get hit with the charge. Trump is telling people to protest. Everyone gets all riled up. And to me, I think it was just another fumbled political move. And the political move was initially launched in the first place to cover up the banking issues, which are truly, in my opinion, what's really going on right now.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's a huge scandal. There's a lot of huge scandals that no one ever talks about. I don't know where you're at with some of your big pharma stuff, but maybe as like a slight segue and we can go back, like what's going on with those? Because I know you've done lawsuits over the PrEP Act for, I think nurses, military members. What's going on the big pharma legal front?
So last week I sued the NSA in 2 different lawsuits. Then I also sued Takeda Pharmaceuticals and Teva Pharmaceuticals. Right now, I have not filed any of my actual PrEP Act cases yet. I have one right now that I'm preparing because a lot of people don't even realize what the PrEP Act is. They don't understand that it's literally a cause of action. It's not this immunity veil that the media portrays it to be. Now, yes, it does grant some level of immunity, but it also is a federal law. It exclusively creates a federal cause of action that you can sue over death or serious bodily injury. And the premise of this is that any countermeasure, and the term countermeasure is used for, it's more inclusive than just vaccines. It could be remdesivir, it could be, suppression of ivermectin, it could be the ventilators. The fact that people were given certain medications or prohibited from receiving certain medications and ventilators, vaccines, whatever it may be, if they were injured or died because of it, you can actually sue for that. The issue is that it's procedurally extremely difficult to navigate. You have to go through this phase that's called exhaustion of administrative remedies with the countermeasure injury compensation program. It's a bunch of legal mumbo jumbo, but the point of it is that you actually can sue. It took me 9 months to cull through this statute to realize like where the elements of this were. And it was so hidden and so buried that it was like taking a page out of a book, cutting out every single word, throwing it in a Ziploc bag, shaking it up and putting it back together. It was completely dismantled. And these claims could go for massive amounts of money. And there have only been 30 claims that have navigated through CICP so far, but out of those 30 claims, they've paid out over $6 million already. So it's important because so many people died. So many people were injured. So many people lost loved ones. So many people are permanently damaged because of this. And, people need to have some means by which they can seek redress and hold people accountable.
Yeah, 2 questions. One, do you think that most people don't do these type of lawsuits because it's hard to go against the government and pharma? Is that why people stay away from it? It's not really like the easiest, most profitable way to be a lawyer. That's like, stress-free. And then also my second question is, actually I forgot my second question, so I'll just start with that. I do know my second question. The National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act, protects certain vaccines on the childhood schedule from liability, and it seems like they're trying to put this on the childhood schedule. Do you think that's why for the liability shield? So I know it's 2 questions, but
I'll just take them in order. So the first question being, why do very few lawyers take these cases? I think it's a combination of a few factors. The first being most lawyers that have been practicing are older that are litigators. If, litigators versus transactional lawyers, the ones that go to court once shit hits the fan, the other ones, the large majority of lawyers try to prevent shit from hitting the fan. I only get involved after it does. So litigators are typically older. They're set in their ways. They have their bread and butter. They know how to go through stuff. They use boilerplate language. They're very good lawyers. There's nothing wrong with that, but they don't want to diversify. They don't want to dig into figuring out new areas of law. And that can be problematic a lot of the times. This is all new. And I call it lawfare as opposed to litigation, because the way that you litigate in courts anymore is completely different. Over the last 3 years, it's completely changed. So I think a lot of it is the fact that people just don't want to, acquire new acumen for a new type of law and new style of litigation. Secondly, the political bias. A lot of people are constrained politically within their employers. The third being, some people actually still think the vaccines work. Some lawyers that could help, that have the abilities, and just don't want to sue over it because they think the vaccines still help for whatever reason. And the fourth reason is that you're helping the little guy. These aren't big corporate clients that have massive abilities to pay retainers. A lot of these clients lost their jobs. They're not making significant money. Some are hourly wage workers, and they're not getting the ability in any way to fund it. So I spent 9 months for free going through that statute, trying to figure it out, because I care more so about principle than I do about money. Like, for me, this is deep rooted in my upbringing, being adopted, my very humble beginnings in central Pennsylvania. Like, if it wasn't for the rights that we have, I couldn't have amounted to anything. So to watch our Constitution just get eviscerated literally pisses me off to the core. So I'm passionate about it out of preservation, because it's what gave me everything. And I'm willing to do stuff for free like that because it's what was required. Now, obviously I still have to live, but it's just, nobody wants to do the work. It's hard. They're scared. They don't want to put their neck on the line. And why bother if you already have a machine running? That's really the main reason. And what was your second question again? You asked,
Yeah, real quick, I want to say it's Mike Yoder. This is that people are asking who it is. I'll put it in the comments and description after. But for those asking, Mike Yoder, he's everybody likes you. But yeah, just letting people know, because I don't have the subtitles like a lot of news right now for your name. The second one was about the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act. It was a way to shield Big Pharma vaccines from liability from side effects, injuries, and deaths. And now they're trying to put the COVID vaccine under that. Is that going to, in your legal view, protect them completely from any lawsuits?
I think there's going to be a lot of hurdles in the way. So I want to say, I don't want to say block. I'd rather say delay. I think that it'll delay liability from coming through. But even just like the PrEP Act, there's a provision that requires people to, like I said earlier, exhaust their administrative remedies. And in doing so, it has one part of the statute says you have to file your claim with the CICP within 1 year of the date the countermeasure was administered. The problem with that is, what if you're 3 years old? In any other realm of law, you can't have a statute of limitations begin to run. Statute of limitations being the time period that you have to file something. It doesn't run till you're 18. Yet here, it doesn't even exclude it for minors. So how can you take away someone's fundamental right to due process, and eviscerate that by saying by 4 years old, you have to file a lawsuit? Now, yes, of course, your parents can do it on your behalf, but it's the child's claim. The child was injured. That child gets the ability to make that decision when they're 18. So that basis alone could completely nullify that part of the law. The second thing is that the West Virginia v. EPA case that came out right after the Dobbs decision with the overturning Roe v. Wade, the West Virginia v. EPA case got no attention because of obviously abortion being a hot topic issue. And the issue with the West Virginia v. EPA case is that, in my opinion, it's the most fundamental and most significant Supreme Court case in the last decade, if not half century, because it takes away the ability of Congress to punt their duties to these administrative regulatory bodies. There was a case back in the 80s called Chevron. It was there's this legal concept called Chevron deference, where Congress will pass a law and they'll give it to the administrative agencies to say how it actually works. It's like, we're passing this law to do X purpose, and we're going to tell the EPA how to regulate it. So it's like playing a board game with a 5-year-old, where the administrative bureaucrats just make up these new rules with FAQs and come out of the agency, and they put it in the code of federal regulations, and they keep changing it. So you can never sue, because by the time you get your case in the court, they just modify it unilaterally without Congress. And then when you sue over it, the congressional intent of the law is whatever Congress intended the EPA's intent to be. That West Virginia v. EPA case severed the ability to do that and said, Congress, do your job. You have one job to do, it's write laws, enact them, say what you mean what you say, put it in the damn law, and stop punting, because Americans didn't elect these bureaucrats. So that can fight what you're talking about with this, adding it to the national child vaccine schedule. They might not be able to do that even. So, and that's something I'm going to sue over.
All right. Well, we appreciate you, Mike. Thanks a lot for that. I want to ask about the banks real quick, but I want to tell a personal story and see if this kind of goes in the same zone. I stepped on a spike. A lot of people know this from years ago. I was like walking in Santa Monica and I stepped on a spike that pops car tires and it went through my foot. And there was like signs missing. Like I had all the evidence that it was just out there in the middle of somewhere that everybody walks. The signage wasn't there, but no lawyer wanted to take my lawsuit because they were like, oh, it's owned by the government and the government has enough money to just run people in circles. Like they have unlimited, resources for lawyers. So nobody wanted to take my case, even though I had a really good case. And I think I probably could have won. I gave up after calling 10 lawyers and like, oh, government? No, I don't want to do it. So it seems like you're one that wants to take on the government, which is super brave and probably not as easy as other things. And you can say if I'm in the right lane with that. And then also with the banks, is there a way that just like Big Pharma never gets held accountable, banks never get held accountable? Like is that ever going to change? Or?
Well, I mean, to answer the first question, most lawyers are just pussies. I mean, they don't want to do the work. I'm just going to tell it like it is. They just want to sit behind a desk, bankroll people. They'd rather take easy lowball settlement offers than actually litigate and advocate for their clients. They don't want to go to the mat. They don't want to try these things. They don't want to, go through motions practice, suppressing evidence. They don't want to compel stuff. They don't want to subpoena stuff. Lawyers want to do the least amount of work possible, sit behind their desk, roll their sleeves up, smoke their fat cigar, drink Blue Label, and roll in the cash without doing a damn thing. And I hate that. I only file suits if I plan on taking it to a jury trial. If I sue someone for $100,000, they call me and ask for, they say they want, I'll offer you $90,000. I'll just tell them to go fuck themselves. That's $10,000 less than what I sued you for. So don't come to me with an offer lower than what my client is entitled to. Or it's either you give it to me through an offer or I take it from you. Lawyers don't have that tenacity anymore. They don't advocate. That's what my biggest concern and gripe is. And with the government, I mean, first off, I tell people all the time, if you're a good lawyer, you don't work for the government. They make like $60K a year as a salary. And there's nothing wrong with that. But damn, $60K after you went to law school? Like, Come on, bro. Like if you were good at your job, you'd have a real one. And, I'm like, what are you doing? So that's, they're afraid of the government because the government tries to intimidate people. I just sued the NSA twice last week. I sued Trump, or excuse me, I didn't sue Trump. Sometimes I want to shut him up, though. He says so much stupid shit, man. I sued Biden and the entire cabinet by myself. 224-page lawsuit. 5 days later, got the entire government to hold off anything with the religious accommodations, and that just got upheld in the Fifth Circuit yesterday, that they're still blocked. So you can do it. They're just afraid. And, in terms of your case, you got a perfect case. You file a government notice of tort claim, especially in California. You have 180 days to do that. You notify them of the tort claim, give them 90 days to wait. Then you file a lawsuit for negligence. If it's on public property, it could be an attractive nuisance. It could be a premise liability type case. So you had a slam dunk case and their insurance policy would have paid it out. And governments are insured.
It's crazy too, because it says like don't walk here, like the sign that's painted, it was half gone. It was all, and it was in the middle of somewhere where hundreds of people walk. They're like, yeah, this happens all the time. It's not, I'm not that stupid. I mean, I could be a little stupid. Like Alex Jones said, he's like, listen, I'm a little, I don't know if I could say the R word on Facebook and YouTube, but I was just minding my own business, and it's in the middle of public property. So I was hoping at least to get the suit, not only for myself, I would have took the money, not going to lie, but hopefully they could move it so this didn't happen to like hundreds of people. But yeah, no one, after 10, I gave up, and it's been years. So enough about me. I'm sure people hear enough about me on my own stream. Let's talk about the banks. Can they ever be sued? Like, how come Sam Bankman-Fried and Silicon Valley Bank, they scam everybody and they just get bailed out and no one ever seems to get held accountable?
Well, I mean, it's because we think the government controls us, but in reality, corporations do, because corporations control the government. I mean, Citizens United 2010 case held that it was a speech-related issue under the First Amendment where you could have unlimited corporate PAC donations to politicians. People don't realize that Silicon Valley Bank, I'll use that one as the first example, was predominantly controlled by the government. 95% of the deposits that were within SVB were not FDIC insured because they exceeded the $250,000 insurance limit. So 95% of the money that was deposited into Silicon Valley Bank was not insured. And what happens with these banks is that they take it in. Regulations say that you only need to maintain 10% of a deposit cash on hand. So if you deposit 250 grand, they can play with 225 of it. They only have to keep 25K in that bank. And essentially there's over 160 billion uninsured customer deposits, and which is like half of the venture capital that funds startups throughout the United States. So that's like 65,000 startups. So just imagine 65,000 startups that now may not even have payroll, and what that does to the economy, what it does to the tech industry. On top of that, Silicon Valley Bank was the 15th largest bank in the United States and had over $210 billion in assets. Second largest bank failure in the history. Yet the biggest thing is that they were buying stock in treasury bonds, and they just shoved that value down. They had $80 billion worth of bonds, and then the feds raised the rates on it with an average yield of 1.5%. So what that does is it just plummets. Everything else is yielding over 5%. So the bottom fell out from under it. And if you want to look at it, what's even crazier is the government effectively controls Silicon Valley Bank. So the government that controls the Fed, that skyrocketed the rates that caused the bottom to fall out, also controlled the bank in the first place. And it's insane to me. I mean, like CNBC, Jim Cramer, literally a month ago was talking about, invest in Silicon Valley Bank at $320 a share. He also was the one that said to buy Bear Burns in 2008.
I call him a tick. He looks like a human tick. It's like it's the joke in the financial world is just do the opposite of whatever Jim Cramer says, because he's wrong quite often.
I know. It's insane to me. Like, he couldn't even be a weather guy. He'd get fired for being wrong more than them. I mean, do we even have the weather on the news anymore? I don't even know. But the banks, I mean, there's 26 planes reconvened 2 days ago in Omaha, Nebraska with the White House officials. That's happened before once, and that was 2008. So I think the Trump thing was just to try to cover up a storm before the bottom falls out financially, because there's no way this inflation rate can sustain.
Yeah, we're going to get back to the Trump thing. This was a great segue, though. I think people enjoyed it because we can get into the things that we feel like they're covering up with this story. Before we get back, you said like 95% or so of the things were over the FDIC insurance or whatever, 250K plus. Sounds like that's just a lot of big money there. Like, the average person, like they go to JP Morgan or Wells Fargo, they weren't going to Silicon Valley Bank. Like, it was all big wigs, all startups, all companies. And then, yeah, I mean, isn't that kind of their fault for buying so many treasury bonds? I don't know when they bought them, what year, but if it was after 2020, it's like, come on, you had to see the feds hiking the rates.
That's the entire point. And all the startups go there because they're able to get the funding. So you go to Silicon Valley Bank as a startup. Well, guess what? You just got controlled by the government. And if they want to pull the plug on you, they can. Look what they did to Kanye with his Apple Pay. If you can take a billionaire's money and on a computer hit a button and freeze that out, what do you think they can do to us? They can do it to anyone that they want. And frankly, I don't necessarily in any way agree with what Kanye said. I'm not advocating or talking to my opinion of it. But the fact that he engaged in protected speech, he lost access to billions of dollars. Like, if private corporations can shut you down like that, private corporations shut Trump down from being able to communicate with the American people. He literally had to ask permission of a company as the president of the United States to communicate with the American populace if he needed to. They took him off every platform. Like, hell, they took him off Spotify. Like, what was he doing? Listening to Eye of the Tiger and getting pumped up in the Oval Office? Like, what are you taking him off there for? He probably couldn't even play like Wordle. It's like, why? And people don't think that it's all about this safe space and protection. Like, there's no legal or moral obligation to care about how someone else feels. You might be a dick, but there's no legal obligation to do so. What happened to sticks and stones can break my bones. Now it's like, don't misgender me or you die. Like, I don't even know how we got here.
Do you think the banks will ever get held accountable? Like, it sounds like you're doing a better. What about Big Pharma?
In terms of accountability, I mean, like, to the point where I can see where they're deterred. I don't think they'll ever be stopped, because look what happened with the Vioxx scandal. That settlement, largest settlement in history with the DOJ, was 8 billion, I think, or something like that. The problem with that was the government also relies on Big Pharma for drugs that are needed. And I'm not saying that Big Pharma is 100% bad. Everyone needs to get out of this whole binary thought concept where everyone thinks is black or white, good or bad, left or right, conservative, liberal. Like, we've eviscerated the gray area that makes, humankind beautiful. The fact that we have disagreements that is so complex, that there's such overlap of thought. That's what it's supposed to be. But we've taken it to putting this binary thought concept where Big Pharma does have drugs that save lives, that are needed, they're necessary. And the government relies on those drugs to operate with military, whatever it may be, with Medicaid, Medicare programs. They need the drugs. If you criminally charge Big Pharma and take away their manufacturing license, they can't produce those drugs that the government needs. So you can't completely stop them. So all you can do, if you can't criminally charge them, is you can go after them in civil court. And if you civilly charge them, the only thing that you can do in the civil realm is take money. So what do? They create a shell corporation. They, reach a settlement agreement. That shell corporation that harvests that money sits on the side. They pay it out, and it's over. But here's the problem. Take ethics and morals out of this. There's no better business model in the history of the world than what they just did with the global vaccine platform, effectively, because the demand is every single heartbeat on the earth, multiple times per person, effectively. The amount of money is unlimited because they fund it through usurpation of taxpayer dollars through government entities. And the supply is unlimited because you can just reproduce the product because you have it through a scientific lab. So you have unlimited product, unlimited funding, and the demand is multiple per person. And if they can do that, the only problem then becomes, can they make more money through forcing the government to do it than what the fine is going to be on the back end? And if so, it's a profitable business model. And the way that they minimize that fine on the back end is that they use, again, Citizens United with their corporate PACs, and the government gets, when I say government, I mean the individuals currently in office, the incumbents, get donations from these big pharma corporations and PACs that keep them in office. So it's a quid pro quo. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. You help me stay in office, and I'll help promulgate rules to make you money. And it just goes in circles over and over and over.
Very rarely do I not have stuff to add. Everybody here knows I love to talk. You said it perfectly, man. You nailed it. It's just vaccine socialism, essentially, where the government funds it, buys it, and gives it to everybody, whether you want it or not. And the doses are bought through the government. So yeah. And like you said, nailed it. If they do get caught, the fine will probably be smaller than the amount of profit they made. So just rinse and repeat. On that note, I want to get back to the Trump situation. I want to hear the legal side or your opinion. I know you're a straight shooter. For me, from the outside, right? I don't know the legality of it. I'm not in the courtroom. I know Alvin Bragg. I understand who he is, and all you have to do is take a look at New York to see how good that's being run.
His fat ass can barely fit in the courtroom.
Hey, now, we love people. My favorite models are the ones that are 10,000 pounds. So I just have to say that, the bigger the better on this show. So we got to.
Well, hey, Alvin fits right in. I'd love to have him on to talk to him.
That being said, yeah, with this, I saw Trump basically, like, it was all caps. It was kind of odd because, I'm not a typo person. I make typos as well, but there were like 3 typos. It was all caps. It was like, I'm going to be arrested, protest, 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 like we're take our nation back. And then the media is saying it happened. And then I predicted, which could have went bad for me, because I always like to tell the truth and be like, I don't know what's going to happen, but my gut's telling me he's not actually going to get arrested on Tuesday. And people are like, you're going to regret that. You're going to get freaking out. And it's been, 3, 4, 5 days past that. He still hasn't been arrested. Is there a possibility that this is just like a whole circus? That I'm not saying he's particularly in on it per se, but it's like, it did help him, I think, raise money. I think it absolutely helped him against DeSantis. You see all the influencers like, I got to vote for him now. Like, where did this come from, and what's up with the caps and the media and Alvin Bragg? Like,
dude, I think he can just get manic. I mean, everyone I know has at least had, like, they've spiraled at some point in their life. Like, they've just been stressed and they just do stupid shit. Like, you just like freak out. And I think that he might be at his wit's end. And, my biggest issue is the fact that it's still a constant push for divide. The fact that video surfaced of that black guy calling for the genocide of whites, from 10 years ago. Like, the only reason this shit is still relevant is because we make it relevant. We talk about it. When they asked Morgan Freeman, how do you get rid of racism? They said, you do so by just stop talking about it. And what they're doing is they're constantly driving this divide between Trump and DeSantis. They want to keep the party divided. If you can divide along political lines between Democrat and Republican, then you take the Republican subculture and you divide that between Trump loyalists and DeSantis, supporters. Then you further separate that by weeding out people that are allegedly anti-Semitic, where you want to go and drive that wedge into the middle. Then you go through people who got vaccinated or didn't get vaccinated. All they're doing is creating so many pieces of this pie and just dividing us into such small subculture and subcutaneous sections, when in reality, what we should be focused on is Americans versus the government, not left versus right, not conservative versus liberal. Everything is at its all-time high in terms of divisiveness. And I think, in my opinion, DeSantis missed a massive opportunity. If he were going to run, that he should have capitalized on it by saying that, as the governor of Florida, I have the authority to investigate whether these are, founded on good faith or actual evidence, or there's legitimate probable cause to extradite a Florida citizen to New York. And what he would have done is, not saying that he would have actually followed through in holding Trump in Florida and not allowing it to be extradited, but he could have played that political gamesmanship of saying, look, even though you've been talking shit about me left and right, I'm still going to put our differences aside and be the bigger person to stand up for the citizens of Florida, just like I would do as president of the United States. He didn't take advantage of that opportunity, and I think that could have flipped the polls. My entire point, though, is I think it's just gamesmanship. Politicians are chess players, and we're the pawns on the board.
I want to ask, because I got to watch the full interview, but DeSantis was like, Putin's a war criminal. And I don't know. I just thought it was weak. I don't care if you like him or not, but if you're going to call him a war criminal, you got to also call a lot of people from America war criminals for invasions. But in general,
I would.
Yeah. As far as missing that point, like, I see the divide and conquer. Like, personally, I don't care if people vote for Trump or DeSantis, because I think there's pros and cons to both. But you notice there is that massive divisiveness in the movement now, that Republicans who like DeSantis more and Republicans who like Trump are really fighting pretty aggressively. I don't know if I just live on Twitter too much, but I see it a lot. But the thing is, just like you said, DeSantis missed the moment. I feel like Trump is kind of leading the base to do that, because he's attacking DeSantis so many times. So I guess you understand the legality of Florida and New York. It's like when someone's basically trying to essentially point to like a scandal of you with girls, call you names every day. Like, are you going to wake up and be like, oh yeah, this guy's trying to Stormy Daniels and Brett Kavanaugh me. Let me go defend him super hard. Like, I understand the pros and the cons of both, but at what point is Trump also responsible for the divide and conquer? Because I don't see him helping it.
I think he's extremely responsible for the. I think he's extremely responsible for the divide. I think that he has a very egotistical personality. I mean, I'm not a through and through Trump, loyalist. I think that he served a purpose. I think that he did a phenomenal job with what he was dealt with, the difficulties he had navigating Congress. I think DeSantis has led Florida well, especially through the COVID pandemic. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all solution, in the sense that there's not a politician who has not done at least one thing good and at least one thing bad. I mean, maybe other than like Obama, I can't really think of anything good he did. But the point is like, you said it earlier, America has been war criminals across the board. We didn't even know they went into Laos. How many times has the U.S. government invaded foreign countries? I mean, what they did was they're shifting out of the military industrial complex into the pharmaceutical industrial complex. We previously made all of our money through war. War is one of the most profitable industries and businesses there are. Look at defense contractors. But I think that every single person involved is responsible for divide, even if sometimes the divide is by pushing against the grain to do something that's right. With like the 20 that held out against McCarthy for the speaker nomination. I mean, people don't know or understand what that was about, but and most people haven't even heard of what's called a motion to intervene. And you can force a recall as a member of the House if one person just needs to file that motion, and then you have to recall the vote. So if McCarthy didn't hedge to following through on what he promised as his, you horse trade backdoor, that's how you get your votes. And then you have the whip that, goes through and whips the votes as well. If he doesn't follow through on things like releasing the J6 footage, stuff like that, all one of those 20 have to do is move to intervene, and he's not going to get the 218 to retain speakership, Now, the alternative is that Hakeem Jeffries is going to be the one that gets in. Now, are we going to put our country in that situation? It's like choosing between gonorrhea and syphilis. What do you want?
I'll take McCarthy over that guy for sure.
I know that's my point. But, it's like there's no good answer. And people don't get that about politics. They don't understand that it's not just like one person's going to save all of us.
Yeah. See, with the Trump and DeSantis, like I think the more I hear from DeSantis and what I've seen from Trump, I think Trump's foreign policy is better, and I trust Trump on foreign policy more. I think DeSantis has done a better job hiring people around him and not like hiring people who hate him, and he's done a better job on Big Pharma. So I could still be swayed either way. But I see very few people acting like that. And I see, I understand it's an election, so there's going to be battles on both sides. But like the way Trump's going at DeSantis, I think a lot of his supporters just follow him. And I see him as dividing the Republican Party. I'm all for calling out the neocons, the warhawks. But, it's kind of like when people voted for Trump and they're like, oh, your grandma's racist. And, they started like going after Trump voters. I see Trump people, not all of them, but some of the influencers going after DeSantis voters as if like instead of trying to teach them why, they're just like bashing them. And I'm like, as much as I think Trump is better on foreign policy and he's the front runner, I feel like it's going to be a really ugly year, and he's responsible for a lot of the division. It's like it's going to be quite the circus for like the next year and a half.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that foreign policy is extremely important right now, especially with everything that's going on globally. But my biggest concern is what is going to be done on American soil, both in terms of reshaping culture and what is going to be done foreign wise in terms of reestablishing our, fortitude on the global scale. Because right now, I mean, they're in Saudi Arabia making jokes. They've created their own SNL just to mock Biden. I mean, he calls foreign nations and they don't even pick up the phone.
Right.
Trump walked into North Korea. Putin respected him, not because they're friends, but if someone is good, if I'm against another lawyer and they pull some, they get something over on me, I'm like, good for you. Like, I respect you because you have to be good to do that. Frankly, right. It's a mutual respect, not a friendship. And there's a difference between the two. Look at what's going on in France. They're rioting. Look what happened in Brazil. They're outspoken. Do you see videos of the French fighting against each other? Do you see videos of the Brazilians fighting against each other? No. You see them opposing the government uniformly. And in America, we're so obsessed with talking about race. We're so obsessed with talking about this trans issue. We're so obsessed with all of these issues, and we're not putting aside our personal differences that are so micro in comparison to what we really need, that we completely miss the boat. It's like dance. They're just puppeteering us, and we're all fighting with each other and not even paying attention to what the problem is.
Yeah, and I want to call out both sides, and I'm sure people that think I haven't criticized DeSantis enough, they're going to enjoy this because it's going to be at him. I want to make America great again and focus on ourselves. I think we're embarrassing ourselves. Obviously, Biden is like a symbolic embarrassment, just like leadership-wise, like pathetic. But even our culture is embarrassing. And like Saudi Arabia, these other countries, everyone's laughing at us, like Russia, China. I don't like the authoritarianism there, but they have a clear kind of identity to some extent. And it's like we're an embarrassment. We absolutely are. So this is my thing for Trump and DeSantis. And I'm going to kind of grill both of them, where it's like when I see DeSantis say that, Russia's just a gas station with a nuclear arms, it's like we're just a McDonald's and a CVS. You know what I'm saying? Like America's turned into a disgrace. So it's like you can call out Russia, but I want to see you look at America and call us out, because we, hating on other countries is not going to fix ourselves. And then also, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Dan Crenshaw are talking about invading cartels. And it's like, if you could invade cartels in Mexico, I mean, when they cross the border, it's fair game. But if you could go and fix Mexico, go fix St. Louis, go fix Chicago, go fix New York City. We can't even fix our own cities, yet they want to run around the world talking about everybody else. So whether it's Trump or DeSantis in there, I love America, but it's like, we could point the finger all we want. We can do our little wars over oil or whatever we're doing. I'm not going to stop us. Obviously, I have no power, but can we please focus on ourselves? Because if we don't culturally like have a revolution or maybe like a renovation, rather like I'm trying to think like a renaissance, a better word than revolution. Like it doesn't matter what China, Russia do. We're our own worst enemy in America. And I feel like Republicans, they don't want to really address that often.
No, and I mean, politics is like this. It's like a dog fight. And the problem is that both dogs, one dog and the two dogs fighting, one is the Democratic Party, one is the Republican Party. The problem is that both of those dogs are owned by the same owner, and the owner markets the fight to be vicious. And the more vicious the fight, the more spectators will go, and the more that the spectators will pay. We're the spectators. The parties are both two wings of the same bird. They're both corrupt in their own ways. I think that it's, in my opinion, clear that there's one side that does have some ethical, tails might still be, distantly attached. But the virtual truth of the matter is that politics in and of itself is about power and control. I mean, it's like Lord of the Flies. The fact that we are so capitulated towards choosing a party over one another. I mean, there's no good that comes out of the divide. It's all about power. I mean, what better way to ensure a profit than to control both at the same time? And I think it's all a product of a godless society, because what happens is in America, we have abandoned Christianity. We've abandoned God. We have now, they're trying to eviscerate that in schools. They're trying to just, the nuclear family has been destroyed. It's at an all-time low, 27%. It's at the lowest it's ever been in half a century. And the reason being half a century is because of World War II. I mean, the issue is that nobody sees a purpose on earth that's higher than their existence here. So what you do is fight as hard as you can to appease whoever you see is the entity that has the most power. And that happens to be politicians, because the ones that truly have the power that control them aren't seen. And if you don't have a higher purpose than what your purpose is here on earth, you have no moral compass. If you don't have, in my opinion, God or some higher power or purpose, then you don't have a moral compass. You have essentially a map of directions, and you just follow. And that's where that's truly the culpable entities. The reason we are where we are as a country right now, in my opinion, is, monsters exist. There truly are evil people out there that want to see this carnage, but not enough of them to carry it out. It's the hardworking, everyday, average person that thinks that they're doing the right thing, that just blindly follows, that blindly complies, that doesn't ask questions, that doesn't actually look into the reasons behind, why am I doing this? Should I be doing this? What am I doing? They just blindly follow orders. They're the ones that carried this out as the foot soldiers. If you're just blindly following orders, I ask, why? Because so were the guards at Auschwitz. And nobody thinks about that. No, if you're yes, sir, yes, ma'am, jump, how high? No one thinks behind the reasoning or the motive or the intent as to why they do certain things. They just listen because it's easier, and they'd rather bury their head in their sand than actually confront the reality that is our country is we're losing our country, and they don't care because it's easier. And people sacrifice what they want most for what they want in the moment. They just bury their head in the sand until it's too late, and then they want to pick up a sword as the hammer's already dropping on their head. And it's too late, and it's every time. We do the same thing over and over and over again, which is by definition insanity.
Yeah, I hear that. I talked to somebody recently, a friend who went against the lockdowns, right? And they're trying to fine him. And instead of just caving, he had a conversation with the person trying to fine him. And it's like that person kind of like snapped out of it. Like, what am I doing? You know what I'm saying? Like, why am I serving this system that is so corrupt over something that doesn't make sense? So every time you stand up personally in your own life and, take any sort of stand and just, keep it real, as opposed to just going along with the wicked system because it's just easier, it's like a chain effect. So I think that that's very valid. I want to say anything you want to say, anything you want to wrap up about the case. My two questions will be, and then say whatever you want. The floor is going to be yours. Is one, where do you see this case going? Do you think that New York just completely drops it and embarrasses themselves and, Trump takes a W? Or do you think they actually go through with this and they just didn't have enough votes at the time? And then also, where can people find you? Because people are asking.
I think what happened was they may have actually learned their lesson, where they don't think things through. They just think one step in advance, and then it always backfires. It's sort of like taking 4 right-hand turns and you end up in the same spot. They very well may have realized that if they brought these charges, it very much so would have backfired. There's no way that they're going to get a conviction. They couldn't even get a grand jury indictment. And on top of that, if they charged him and it failed, he's just going to get more emboldened. People are going to just start casting stones again from inside their glass houses, and it's going to get out of control. So I don't think that they wanted that risk, and perhaps they actually listened to it first. They actually thought this through and said, you know what, this is not good. We're not going to do that. The other part of me thinks that Bragg might have just been going out on his own trying to make a name for himself and realized that this was not the way to do it. And he was instead of making a name for himself, he's going to make an ass out of himself. And that would be just like cemented in history. But, I'm going to keep fighting this. I'm going to keep fighting this until either God calls me home or Hillary Clinton finds me, because our country genuinely needs it. And, people that are interested in, if people have questions and stuff, I do consultations online. I do constitutional law classes teaching people how to learn and exercise their rights. Because we don't even know that. We preach exercise your rights, but how are you going to do that if you don't even know what your rights are? So, people can find me on my website. It's yoderesq.com. That's yoderesq.com. I also have a podcast out. It's called Legally Armed, on Apple, Spotify. I think it's on every platform. And then Instagram, social media, Twitter, it is Yoder_ESQ. And then I have more contact information on both those pages as well.
Sweet. And I'll be on the podcast at some time in the next few weeks. We're probably going to record it today. And also, I want to let people know I'm excited. On Monday, I'm going to be launching a new website, a partnership I have with a friend. I'm trying to get into the game of news media and also just disseminating information on a website. There's a lot of news websites out there, and having my own, I could share any story I want. I could, I'm not restricted by Facebook, YouTube, or anything. So I'm trying to put my money where my mouth is and really do new things this year to push back against the culture and claim some ownership on the internet. So I'm excited for that Monday. Thanks, Mike, and check out his podcast. It's called Legally Armed, correct?
Yep.
All right. I'll be on there later this week, so you got to watch our episode. Thank you, guys. God bless. And this has been the Dream Rare Podcast with Mike Yoder. Have a good day, folks. Hey, what's going on, my friends? Just a few ways to stay in touch and support if you'd like to. The first way is dreamrare.com. We have blue beanies, black beanies, pink hats, other colored hats, freedom versus tyranny shirts, stay blessed long sleeve, God is great long sleeve, and lots of more cool items coming soon. Dreamrare.com. Check out the shop to support. Everything's made in the United States. Handpicked by me. Patreon.com/raretalk. For $5 a month, you can help support me, support the show. If you haven't noticed, unlike other channels, I don't work with very many sponsors, sometimes none at all. And part of the way I'm able to do that is with the dreamrare.com shop and patreon.com/raretalk. So thank you guys for keeping this show free, unimpeded, uninterrupted. I'm forever grateful. My free email list is stayintouchwithme.com. So check the links below in the description, or just type in on any browser, stayintouchwithme.com, all one word. You'll find my email list, put it in there, and it's the least annoying email list you'll ever be on. I barely use it because I don't like getting emailed every day or every week. It's annoying, so I don't do it. Stayintouchwithme.com. It helps me take back some power away from big tech. Telegram, t.me/dreamrarechat or @dreamrarechat. Due to censorship, I post all my live stream and videos there. Sometimes I have some bonus content, and I try to give people a heads up when Facebook or YouTube won't. Dream Rare Chat at Telegram. My Instagram is @dreamrare. Thanks for everybody following there for shorter content. And dreamrarelinks.com, that's dreamrarelinks.com, has all my stuff. My podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, my music on Spotify and Apple, my Rumble page, my BitChute and Gab page. All my links are found at dreamrarelinks.com. Thanks for watching, folks. God bless you. You already know I'll be back with more content soon.